Hello and welcome to Pluralsight. My name is Brian Alderman. I'm a Microsoft MVP, a Microsoft Certified Trainer or an MCT for over 20 consecutive years. I speak at a plethora of conferences throughout the country, throughout the world, in fact. I've authored 4 different books, 2 on Microsoft's SharePoint, 1 on SQL Server, and 1 on Windows 2000 Professional. My Twitter handle is Brian Alderman. My website, www.microtechpoint.com, is my company, and you can find my speaking engagements there as well as my blog called Brian's Blog. And in one of my posts in Brian's blog, you'll find links to training similar to this. And the first thing I want to do is provide you a course introduction. I want you to have an understanding as to what you can expect as you go through this course. And this will include an overview of the different services that we'll be discussing. The different services that we'll be talking about include Microsoft Teams, OneDrive for Business, Flow and Power Apps, as well as components within security and compliance. So some really heavy-duty services that are offered through the Office 365 suite of applications that we have. Now, in this module, I want to provide you an overview of the different services. So, for instance, within the Office 365 services realm, as I mentioned, we have Microsoft Teams. Well, what is Microsoft Teams? I'm going to provide you an introduction to that shortly, as well as OneDrive for Business, Flow and Power Apps, and even Staff Hub, if you haven't heard of that. Now, in addition to the Office 365 services, I'm going to talk about different components available to you within security and compliance. The first one is eDiscovery. We'll talk about that in some more detail, as well as data governance. We'll talk about the Secure Store and Secure Score. There's a Secure Store application, and there's a Secure Score that tells you how your Office 365 security implementation is working. We'll talk about compliance and define what that is, and we'll talk about data protection, different ways for us to provide protection to all of our content inside of Office 365. Now, the first service I want to talk about is Microsoft Teams. I'm pretty excited about this service because it has so much to offer. It's really broken into 2 separate components, one being file storage and one being communication. So it's a best of both worlds if you take Skype for Business and it integrates with SharePoint and it integrates with OneDrive for Business. We're going to see all that. But as you can see here, it's a platform that you use that combines your workplace chat, your meetings, your screen sharing. You can have notes, you can have attachments. It's a very, very powerful service. And in fact, Microsoft has announced this will be the replacement for Skype for Business. It also provides extensions that allow you to integrate with non-Microsoft products like Twitter, Facebook, GitHub, and several other products that are out there. If you've ever used Slack, this is similar to Slack. So Microsoft Teams, remember, I'm just providing an overview here, and then we're going to go into much more detail in the latter parts of this course. And the next service is OneDrive for Business. This is a personal online storage space that's stored in the cloud. It's available for all of your employees, and it's for their personal work files. So in SharePoint, we collaborate on documents, so multiple people have access to those documents, but I may have documents that I want to work on by myself, all right? Maybe a proposal to my manager or an idea for the company as a whole, but it's personal workspace for me. So what I have is my personal workspace here where I can work on documents specific to me. Now I can share this out. If I'm working on a document, I want Linda to be able to provide some input. I can share that with her. But the good thing about this too is it's all synchronized. So I can be working on it with my mobile device. I can be on a flight across country and I can be working on it in flight and I can be working on it at home and I can be working on it in the office. So it's always going to sync up. So I have a single copy of that. So each of those different locations I just spoke about has to have the OneDrive for Business sync client available to us. Now, the next option is Microsoft Flow. And Microsoft Flow is an online workflow service that automates events. These are known as workflows. You're probably familiar with these if you work with the on-prem flavor. And these are accessible across most of the common apps and services available through Office 365. The most common use of Flow is to receive notifications, but it can also be used to automatically copy files. And if you want to extend it, you can monitor what's being said in Twitter. You can set regularly scheduled reminders with it. So it's just a way for automating business processes. And another service is Microsoft Power Apps that works very closely with Flow that we just talked about. And this is a service that allows you to build and use custom business apps that's going to connect to all of your data. The connections will work across the web as well as your mobile device. but it doesn't require the time and expense of custom software development. So look at Microsoft Power Apps as the successor to Microsoft InfoPath Forms and Access Services. And another way to look at Flow and Power Apps is the successor to SharePoint Designer. When you sign up for Microsoft Power Apps, you can connect to more than 200 services. And as I mentioned previously, you can manage data either in the cloud or on-prem. And the last service I want to provide you an introduction to or an overview of is called StaffHub. Now, StaffHub is helpful in retail environments because it can be used on mobile devices. Your managers can create and update and manage shift schedules for the team of employees that they're managing. Employees can access their schedule, and they can use this to propose shift swapping. So this helps your staff workers manage their workday by giving them access via their mobile device most often to their schedule, as well as receiving information from management, and it provides them the ability to access resources that are related to the specific job or task that they're responsible for. And the last area I want to provide you an overview of and an introduction to is the topic called security and compliance, and there's several different components in here. The first one is e-discovery, and that's the process of identifying and delivering electronic information that can be used as evidence in a legal case or legal cases. So you may have information out there that's just normal documentation right now, but if something happens, it becomes a record, and now we may have to preserve that information as it is, and that's an example of e-discovery. Our next one is governance, and Microsoft's definition of governance is the set of policies, roles, responsibilities, and processes that control how an organization's business divisions and IT teams work together to achieve its goals. And that's how Microsoft defines governance. So look at it this way. It's a way for us to define the who, what, when, where, why, and how of our content access. The Secure Store is a service that provides storage and mapping of credentials such as your account names and passwords. This is primarily used when accessing external data sources, so you often use the Secure Store with the business connectivity services. Now, another term similar to Secure Store is Secure Score. And I'm going to make sure you have a thorough understanding of the difference between the two when we start discussing that later on in the course. Compliance. This is managed through your compliance manager. It allows you to track, assign, and even verify an organization's regulatory compliance activities that are related to Microsoft's professional services and cloud services like Office 365, Dynamics 365, and Azure. And data protections, protecting the data that's stored in Office 365 and monitoring the type of information that is shared. And this is country-based, so we have different financial requirements in the US than there are in the UK or up in Canada or in Mexico. And there's different health requirements in the US versus UK, Canada, and Mexico, which means whenever you go in to identify or define data protection, and for instance, creating a DLP, a data loss prevention rule or policy, you'll have to create specific ones per country. So that's an introduction of some of these terms that we'll expand on later on in the course. So what I wanted to do in this module is to provide you information about the Office 365 services, just an overview or an introduction to Microsoft Teams, OneDrive for Business, Flow, and Power Apps, as well as StaffHub. And then we have another entirely separate category within security and compliance where I introduced e-discovery, data governance, secure store, compliance, as well as data protection. As I mentioned previously, we will be expanding on these a lot more as we go through the course. Well, next up is the opportunity to learn about how to implement Microsoft Teams.